is to get both of your vaccines. The Pfizer vaccine is only about 55% effective after the first dose, and the Moderna vaccine is about 80% effective after the first dose. So in order to get to that 95% where you are pretty protected from severe infection, um, you need to get 2 doses. Yeah. And then you mentioned the process seemed a bit rushed. So that's definitely on my slides. I'm going to get to that in a second. Any other burning questions that folks have? Let's see if I'm missing
I'm
anything
sorry,
in
and
the
I
chat.
apologize for tuning in late. You're
No worries.
asking,
Hi.
hi, you're asking what we're hearing in the community, some of the concerns we're hearing from the community, or concerns that we hear like within our family, or the ones that we have ourselves.
Yeah, all of them, all of them. We're just trying to clear up any misconceptions here.
Okay. Hi everybody, I'm Tammy Pullins. Um, I do some community work in the West Philadelphia area. And so what I hear a lot from general community is that obviously the mistrust of the science, how they feel like they're going to be injected with something other than a vaccine.
Hmm.
Generally from my family members, what I'm hearing is that they just are afraid of getting the vaccine because they don't want to get sick, as opposed to getting the vaccine so they don't get sick. So I think
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
unclear that the way this, if I'm understanding it correctly, the way this vaccine works is that you're not exactly injected with COVID-19,
Yes. Yes.
but because
So
you have certain vaccines, I'm sorry, because you have certain vaccines where like the flu vaccine or the measles vaccine that has a little bit of that in it, people are assuming that COVID-19 also has, the vaccine for COVID-19 also has the COVID-19 in it.
right, right. And I'm glad you asked that question. That's a really good one. It's one that came up a little earlier in the presentation. And
I
I
apologize.
mean, no worries. This is just, this highlights the point that it's a major concern for folks. So yeah, the live uh, vaccines, live attenuated vaccines, there aren't many of them in the US, but exactly, you mentioned measles. So measles, mumps, rubella is one of them. The flu vaccine that most people get, the shot in your arm, is actually not a live virus. It's just a part of the capsule of the flu vaccine. So just um, like particulate matter. Uh, the intranasal flu vaccine is a live attenuated virus, but that is used much less commonly. So exactly, will the COVID-19 vaccine give me the COVID-19 virus? No, absolutely not. It cannot. It doesn't have the virus in it, period. Um, what you're getting in the form of mRNA is the blueprint to allow your body to print a a tiny piece of the cell surface. And so in order for the virus to act like a virus and infect you and replicate, you would need its actual DNA, right? Like you would need the virus, the living organism. And instead, what you've got is just like a piece of my shirt, right? So the body can imprint, the immune system can imprint on this piece of my shirt. And the next time it sees me, if this is a very unique uh, sleeve cuff, the next time it sees me, it can identify, hey, you're that Mawusi girl with the, with the black shirt, and know how to attack me. But um, but the shirt is not me. The shirt isn't an animate object. It can't do the things that I can do, right? So introducing the piece of the virus's cell surface um, is, there's no way that it can infect someone with COVID-19. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. And I just want to clarify here, just as Gwynny mentioned, we're sort of looking at you all as ambassadors to your community, right? This is why she got in touch with each of you all. Folks trust you, folks have difficult conversations with you. And so the goal here is to make sure that you understand these concepts well enough that you could even go repeat them back to people. So if in any of my explanations, there's still some question as to what exactly we're talking about, feel free to just stop me and dig further.
If I
Okay.
could, yeah,
Mhm.
I could just ask, it's kind of, I guess it's kind of a two-part. And if you're going to cover it, I'm sure you're going to cover it in some way. But I wanted to make sure I hear some information about people who are autoimmune, because I know most conditions
Uh-huh.
are not identified, but most conditions are autoimmune conditions. The regular ones that we don't normally associate with that, like high blood pressure and fibromyalgia. A lot of those things are autoimmune. So I wanted to get some dialogue about that. And then the second
Yeah.
was that, as I understand, that the COVID vaccine is somehow working with the proteins that are in your body and helping to develop that immunity. So I'm wondering
Mm-hmm.
who may have low proteins in their body. Maybe let's say people, and I heard a little bit of you talking about the plant-based diets or something like that. Some people who do plant-based aren't as conscious about the proteins. So I'm wondering if people have don't have enough proteins in their body might be in jeopardy of not really being able to build up those things. Just those two kind of gray areas.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Those are good questions. I'm just gonna kind of make a note. The one on autoimmune disorders, we're gonna come back to that. So I'll start with the second question first. The folks who can't respond well to the vaccine are the people who have very specific immune deficiencies. Usually these are genetic, where they were born without the ability to make certain types of antibodies. So it's not so much just that maybe you don't have enough protein in your body or you're not eating enough protein. It's really specifically that your body can't make like the IgG or the IgA that is an antibody. But you're right to think about the ways that our daily habits can affect our immune system. So it turns out that really simple things like being sleep deprived can keep you from making as many antibodies. So there was this one study. Yeah, I know, right? So we actually have this, Byte Wellness has this lower the load course. I'll tell you about it at the end of this. If you're interested in signing up, it's free. It's 14 days text message based course where we teach you how your healthy habits can affect your immune system. So specifically, how do you support your immune system with eating, exercise, and rest? And one of the things mentioned on one of the last days of the lessons actually is um, one study showed uh, being sleep deprived for just one day, like the day before you got a flu vaccine, reduced the number of antibodies that you made 5 days out from flu vaccine. Now, when they checked like 4 weeks later, the the two groups had the same number of antibodies, but that's after just one night of sleep deprivation and then returning back to normal. So you can imagine for folks who maybe work third shift and are constantly sleep deprived, you can imagine how that would just dull their ability to respond to the vaccine, and they just won't make enough antibodies and they may not reach that height, that peak of the 95% or 94% efficacy. So I wouldn't worry so much about protein intake, but I would, you know, counsel folks to make sure you're getting enough sleep, about 8 to 10 hours, and you feel well rested in the morning. Make sure folks are eating, a very well balanced diet that does include lots of plants, veggies, fruits of different colors to make sure they're getting their vitamins and minerals. And then regular, moderate exercise. Don't have to do anything too strenuous. That can actually dull your immune response if out of the blue you just like run 5 miles and you don't usually run at all. But if you can get to the place where you're doing even just 30 minutes of moderate walking every day, even if that's walking around your block or around your home, that actually improves your immune health and your ability to make antibodies and respond to viruses amazingly. So great question. All right, we covered that one. I think we covered this myth pretty carefully. You guys are confident that you can tell people why the COVID-19 vaccine will not give them COVID. Okay. And then the next question I've heard a lot of is, well, maybe, is this safe for Black people? Like, have they tested Black folks? And then it turns out that, yeah, there was a pretty significant sample of Black folks in both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. So close to 10%, looking at like 9.8, 9.7%, doesn't perfectly match the 12% or so of us in the United States, but pretty darn close. So confident that there were not higher levels of side effects, that there weren't more problems in Black folks who received the vaccine here when they did subgroup analysis. And in fact, given the higher rates of COVID we've seen and higher rates of death we've seen in our communities, it may be even more important for us to get the vaccine. Okay. The third thing that I've heard, I'm sorry, question?
Yes, Dr. Sid. I was just wondering, I know a couple of the things that I have in my searching and listening and reading and various doctors and listening to the different studies. My curiosity is what exactly is in this vaccine. I had heard there were some types of metals. There were somehow connected to 5G. I've heard a whole lot of stuff. I've heard the fact that it may change your actual DNA. I've heard a lot of things, so I'm not sure, quite sure by listening to various things, or there are various things that different people have spoken, not really knowing if that is true. That's one. That's number one. Number two is a person I would look at myself. I'm very leery because I have fibromyalgia. I also have a multiple amount of allergies. I'm allergic to many things. I just think I'm supposed to be in a bubble or something. I'm just very, very allergic, and I have already experienced an anaphylaxis. I am not real tickled about doing anything. Then I've also talked with people that have had the vaccine, and they got the first one. They said the first one was fine. The second one almost threw them for a loop. So I've got some concerns.
Yeah. Okay. So, Dr. Sid, thank you for outlining those. Most of those we're actually going to cover, so I'm going to keep us moving. Let's talk about the allergies. So, the only folks who the WHO, the CDC say should just absolutely not get the vaccine would be people who've had severe or anaphylactic allergic reactions to a vaccine in the past. So they're really specific about if you have a latex or a food allergy or an environmental allergy, bee pollen, you don't have to worry about this vaccine. It's specifically if you've had an anaphylactic response to vaccine products in the past. And so that kind of leads into your question of what's in this vaccine. So what's in the vaccine is mRNA, which is protein. And that's kind of what encodes the message that allows you to print out that little piece of my shirt or that cap that we talked about. There's fat covering the mRNA to protect it. and there's a little bit of sugar to stabilize it. Those are the only things that are in it. I've heard something about like fetal cells, cells from fetuses, and I've heard the the thing about metal, that maybe microchips are in it, but again, no, just those components. So anyone who has had an allergic reaction to a prior vaccine or to these components should stay away. But simply having severe allergies to other things is not a reason not to get the vaccine. I would take your EpiPen with you. If you had an anaphylactic reaction, you probably have one handy, right? And then they're supposed to watch you for 15 minutes before you leave. So if you're going to have a reaction, it's going to happen then, and you're still in the facility with these medical providers.
Right. So when you're saying an allergic reaction to a vaccine, or does that include like the desensitization shots? Because that's where I had that, and they could never figure out. I was getting like 6 different desensitization shots for my allergies, and they never figured out which one did it.
So that's what's tricky. I assume the desensitization shots, right? They probably contained the thing that you were supposed to be desensitized from. So if it was like tree pollen, there's probably some tree pollen in there, and you get successively higher levels of tree pollen. So,
yes.
So I would talk this over with your doctor, but it strikes me that probably what you had the response to was not the shot components, right? So much it was the tree pollen or whatever it was that you were being desensitized against or desensitized from. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. It's very scary, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Any questions you have about whether you are an appropriate candidate for the vaccine, have that conversation with your doctor. Seriously, even if you haven't talked to your primary care doc in a little while, this is what we're here for, to have these conversations. They know your personal history. They'll help you talk through the risks.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Good question. I'm looking down at the other things that you mentioned. So we talked about contents. There was a question about autoimmune, but I'm going to get to this question about fertility first, because I've heard a bit about that. So there's folks wonder, well, can women get the vaccine? Will it affect our fertility? Can pregnant women get the vaccine? So there's just no reason to believe that the COVID-19 vaccine will affect women's fertility. In all the talk about the spike protein, which is the piece of the virus's cell surface, which is just like my shirt sleeve, right? Or the helmet that I showed you on the earlier slide. That's called a spike protein. And it turns out there's this other protein that's important in the placenta binding to the uterus in pregnancy that also is called a spike protein, but the sequences are very different and it's not the same thing, right? It's very different. And so I think this rumor got started because folks heard, you're being primed against the virus's spike protein, and then someone was aware that there's a spike protein involved in pregnancy, and they were worried that that might prevent pregnancy, but it just doesn't work that way, since antibodies are very specific. And so again, like if you show them my black shirt sleeve, it's not going to get my black shirt sleeve confused with a red shirt sleeve just because they're both shirt sleeves. It's only going to go for the virus or my black shirt sleeve. And it turns out that in the Pfizer study, 23 women actually became pregnant in the follow-up after having received the vaccine, and many were probably pregnant while they were receiving the vaccine. Of those 23 who became pregnant, the one who lost the pregnancy was actually not in the vaccine arm, she was in the placebo arm. So we really just, in the clinical trial data, we have no reason to believe that fertility would be hindered or that pregnancies would be challenged by these vaccines. Now, the thing that pregnant women should know, they should have this conversation with their doctor, and OBGYNs are actively telling pregnant women, go get vaccinated, especially if you're in a high risk group. But the reason why I say it makes sense to have that conversation with your doctor is pregnant women were not included. They weren't knowingly included in either of these vaccine trials. And that's because in the US, you can't include pregnant women in a trial until you've done just a bunch of extra studies on animals, pregnant animals, just to be very sure that there's no sign of harm to the fetus or to the mother. And so Moderna has actually completed those trials in pregnant mice with no problem, no adverse events. And Pfizer has not yet completed those trials in mice. So like we're not going to see pregnant women in these trials in the next few days. It's something to look out for those results. They're probably each going to include pregnant women in a new set of trials just to be safe. But you know, the World Health Organization, the CDC, and multiple scientists say there's no reason for us to believe that the vaccine would be harmful in pregnant women, especially because we actively vaccinate pregnant women with other things. We encourage pregnant women to get the flu vaccine, for example. Also important to recognize that pregnancy suppresses the immune system. So you're at even greater risk for developing COVID-19 or any other virus, which would be harmful to the pregnancy. Okay, any questions there? Not really. Okay, good. So then we've got number 4. And this is what you asked about, Gwenny. So is the COVID-19 vaccine development was rushed? Is it really safe? And it's actually a misconception that it was rushed. So the COVID-19 virus is called SARS-CoV-2, and it's the syndrome that it causes is called COVID-19. And it's actually like a very close cousin or even a sister to these other viruses that caused pandemics in the last 20 years. So you guys remember SARS? That was SARS-CoV-1. This virus looks so similar to that one when they sequenced it that they gave it practically the same name. And then you remember MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. Neither of these affected Americans so much, but they were pretty huge throughout the rest of the world. So MERS, I think MERS hit us around 2014. And so since then, we've had scientists attempting to build vaccines based on these sequences so that they'd be prepared for the next coronavirus pandemic. And we just had, you know, they didn't have any idea when it would be. But it turns out that this COVID-19 vaccine has really been in development in one form or another for now going on a full decade. And then this mRNA technology that we keep hearing about is brand new for vaccines. It's not brand new in terms of therapy. Like it's being used as therapy in cancer, actually. It's being used as therapy in autoimmune diseases, just using different sequences, but this same idea of giving your body mRNA so that it can print out an important protein that it needs to get the immune system going in a certain direction. That's been happening for a long time. So it was really encouraging for me to understand the history there, that this isn't something that truly developed only in 10 months.
So I had a question
Mhm.
based on what you're sharing now. So I
Yeah,
thought more of the rushed, the idea of things being rushed had to do with the fact that that it had not been tested on individuals, as opposed to whether or not it was there or not, that they didn't have
I
enough
see.
time to test it. That's what my understanding was about the concern.
Got it. Okay. Well, yeah, I guess the answer to that would be those clinical trials that have now been published. And so again, really reassuring that Pfizer tested like 45,000 people from all over the world. And we saw those results, right? 95% efficacy there. Um, and the side effects were those sort of minimal side effects that we were talking about that I'll share with you shortly.
So
And then, uh-huh,
right, just to clarify that piece, over time,
yeah,
okay, the test over time, just not enough time
right.
has elapsed to really see what would happen if someone had, what's going to happen in a year, what's going to happen in 6 months, even those types
You're
of things
right.
haven't been done yet.
Yeah, I mean,
So
you're
those
totally
are some of the
right there.
concerns that I hear. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I, that's something I wondered about, honestly. That was kind of the only negative for me, pushing me away from getting the vaccine. And for anyone who came on a bit later, I mentioned I got my 2 doses of Moderna. Um, but, you know, certainly for me as a healthcare provider, as a physician who's taking care of COVID patients, like I'm definitely exposed. Um, the risk of developing severe COVID, of possibly dying, that was just so much higher for me than the possibility of some unknown side effects a year or 2 years down the road. So I don't have a great answer for that. I would say, it's a risk and benefit conversation that's worth having with your doctor, it's worth having with your family. I do believe that if we look at the whole of the pandemic, there is so much death and there is so much disability and there is so much heartache. The way for us to move forward out of this is to develop herd immunity, and the way to do that without many more millions of people dying is to get the vaccine. So I don't have anything to really allay your concerns there. I think it's about, cost versus benefit balance.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
That, no problem. Thank you. That was a really good question. Okay. COVID-19 vaccine has dangerous side effects, so that not the was that?
Oh, I was going to ask a question, but I don't want to interrupt your flow of thought. I'll wait.
Well, I was just, thank you, Gwenny. I will get back to you in just a second. I was just going to reiterate what we said earlier with Dr. Sid. So the only dangerous side effect that has been recognized is this risk for anaphylaxis in people who have known allergies or history of allergy to vaccines. I'll share with you, I had my 2 doses of Moderna. I did have significant side effects after each. They started maybe 12 hours out and then were gone within about 24 hours. First time I felt just very fatigued. I certainly had a sore shoulder in the left shoulder where I got the injection. Um, it felt like, if you've had the flu shot, it kind of felt like that, but a little bit worse, just a very sore muscle. And I did have maybe subjective fever and chills. So I didn't take my temperature, but I felt a little bit kind of hot inside. And if you've ever had, just a common cold where you just don't feel great, just kind of tired, a little bit worn down, that's how it felt for about 24 hours. When I got my second shot, I had much worse fever. So I actually it was bad enough that I decided to take my temperature. I did have a low grade fever. I did have chills. It did interrupt my sleep. I was really uncomfortable. Again, was gone in like 24 hours. And I felt okay about it because I know that that's what happens when the immune system revs up, right? That is my immune system doing its job, seeing this, seeing the piece of spike protein that my body printed, seeing, remember, the piece of spike protein is not the virus, it's just like my shirt sleeve, or it's just like that army cap. It needs to be introduced to the immune system so we can prime it and it can start spitting out antibodies. And so each time, I was uncomfortable. I'll tell you that. That's something to reiterate to your community is, yes, after your first shot, you might feel quite a bit of discomfort, even fever, but that's supposed to happen. That means you're getting the intended results, and it's still important to go back for your second shot.
So can I ask you a question?
Yes, yes.
So provided that that's the norm,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that's enough to, I mean, have you heard of whether or not that is, has been scaring people? And getting the second shot?
The people who've gotten the shot this early, most of the folks I know who've gotten both vaccines have been healthcare providers. So a lot of the folks who are doctors or nurses at my hospital. And so our response when we feel it is either to, acknowledge the discomfort and then write it off as, oh, that's our immune system working, because we understand how that goes. But some of the side effects have been disconcerting enough for people to actually talk about it, right? So friends of mine have texted, hey, I have a swollen lymph node. Did you have lymph node swelling? Or I've got joint pain in my finger. Did that happen to you? So it's concerning enough to people who have clinical training and who are like very, very interested in the vaccine development and the trials and following along the way. People who you'd expect not to be surprised by these side effects. But once you experience them, because they're more severe than most vaccines we've had before, or most vaccine side effects I've had, I think it can kind of throw people off. So yeah, my concern is that when my friends and family get their first vaccine, and I've been telling everybody this, I'm concerned that they'll worry they've been infected. They'll be so uncomfortable with the symptoms, they won't want to go back to get the second one.
Now, what about the temperature that's required to store these vaccines?
Yeah.
What happens if the temperature gets warmer than what's expected in storing these vaccines? Then what? Are they still okay, or they have to be thrown out?
Right. So I mean, they're kept in freezers. They have different, based on their makeup, right? They have different required temperatures, but the healthcare systems that are keeping track of these, they have a protocol. So you probably heard in the news, right? About every once in a while, we hear about a tray of vaccines that's been kept out, that was accidentally kept out overnight or was misplaced. That actually happened in the Chicagoland area recently. And those just have to be thrown out. Exactly. That's just a waste. You can't use them because you don't know if they'll be effective. They probably won't be.
So
Yeah.
I kind of, it's connected with that. My question is, because I know that they still working with the logistics and the planning and all of that. What are the chances that they won't have a second vaccine available? Just based on logistics and some, samples being lost. And what would happen then if they can't get it within that 4-week or whatever time frame? Would they have to start the process over with a new first dosage?
So that's a really good question. So, I think one of the reasons why it's taking so long to, um, at least in Illinois, to roll things out to the general public is that they are trying to make sure they have enough doses to give each person their two. So assigning those 2 doses to each person before they begin setting up those appointments. The recommended interval, max interval for receiving your second dose is about 42 days. So not extending beyond that 3 weeks very long or that 4 weeks very long, right? So if you couldn't get your second vaccine at 3 weeks for Pfizer or at 4 weeks for Moderna, and you had to wait like one more week, then technically you'd still be able to receive it. I don't know what the protocol is about whether you'd be forced to start the process over again. And I'd have to check the data to give you some recommendations there. That's again a conversation I would have with your doctor. Based on your risk factors, they'll sort of decide the timing there. That was a good question, though. Okay.
What do you say to people who, hi, what do you say to people who have had COVID and feel like they already have the antibodies and they don't need the vaccine?
Yeah, so that's one of our questions. We don't know how long the COVID-19 antibodies last after infection, and we have seen cases of reinfection reported. So folks who've had COVID-19 should still get the vaccine. The recommendation is to wait around 3 months after your symptoms resolve, to let your immune system calm down before sort of revving it up again, right? Before getting your vaccine. But we are recommending that you get the vaccine. Good question. Good question. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
After you get the vaccine, how long is it expected to protect you before you might have to take another one?
That's a good question. We don't know. We don't know. Someone made a great point earlier, right? That we haven't, maybe you did, ma'am, I'm sorry. We haven't observed people for a very long period of time. The clinical trials, the FDA required Moderna and Pfizer to observe for 2 months after the last vaccine dose, but that's all the data we have. So Moderna and Pfizer have said that they're going to continue their clinical trials. The approval was for emergency use since we're in the middle of a pandemic. Hopefully by next year, this time, we have clearer answers about how long the antibodies last. Yeah, I would expect, and this is what I've heard discussed, I would expect us to take a new COVID vaccine every year, sort of the way we have a new flu vaccine every year, just because the virus shifts and it gets really crafty and evolves, and this shirt sleeve or its cap, the sequences can change, making it harder for your old antibodies to recognize it. So whether or not we are able to conserve our antibodies a year out is a different question. But regardless, we would probably still need to update the vaccine, kind of a booster.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I have 2 questions. One is kind of political, and maybe the other one is. So the one question is, what is the likelihood that this could be a chemical attack? And if it is a chemical attack, in your professional experience, is there or could there be a vaccine to prevent a counterattack? So for example, the vaccine that people are already taking, if this is a chemical attack from another country, China, for example, are we thinking ahead of a counter vaccine? And is this
That's
something that you guys even entertain and, as a medical professional?
that's just like way over my pay grade, Gwenny. I I don't um
The question is like
I don't know.
what is the end game? Like I'm seeing that like what I'm fathoming in my head is that if a person is in the medical industry, like a medical professional like yourself, and you're working in a
Mhm.
hospital, you're working with patients, then it is to your advantage. It makes sense for you guys to get it because you're walking right into a storm pretty much when you go inside the hospital.
Yeah.
But for lay
Yeah.
folks and everyday people, it's like, I don't know, like if they're quarantining at home and working at home, the question is, do they take the risk of not taking the medicine, seeing what happens a year or two down the road, and to perhaps consider taking it then and just stay safe inside their homes and work from home and just be around their immediate family members? The question is, what are the safest options given that there are risks all around and we kind of don't
Yeah.
know what the end game could even possibly look like?
Yeah. That's a good question. I know there are conversations, that's a conversation that I've had in my household with my family. Um, I know we're not the only ones having that conversation. So, there are two ways to look at this, right? One is sort of the big picture. And I just mentioned in order to get past this pandemic, in order to be able to open up borders, in order to be able to, in order for me not to worry that my 82-year-old grandfather is gonna like leave us too soon because he comes in contact with COVID-19, we need to achieve herd immunity. And what herd immunity means is just the overwhelming majority of us are immune. We've developed that long term immunity against COVID-19. These viruses only live really in animals, they can only live in humans or in non human animals. They don't really last long on surfaces, on inanimate objects. So someone mentioned earlier, you mentioned parasites earlier, they actually are parasites. They can only live um, in a being, which means if you can stop yourself from being infected, right? If we just stop the spread of the infection, then the virus just slowly dies off. It The reason that we're getting new strains, the reason that it is mutating so rapidly is that it's continuing to spread all over the world. And so if we could stop it from spreading, it wouldn't be a problem. And that was the purpose of the lockdowns, right? And that's the purpose of the social distancing and the hand washing, just keep it from spreading. But we're just not doing a really good job of that. I mean, the the you mentioned the lay people, the non-healthcare providers. It may be that there's a higher risk. Don't quote me on this, but it's possible that there's a higher rate of COVID infection in the non-healthcare providers than there is in the healthcare providers. Um, I don't think that necessarily being out in the world and not in a hospital protects you. You're right, Gwenny, that if you are distancing and you're only spending time with your immediate family or your social pod of protected people, and they are also, by the way, being super responsible and only spending time with you and not going out to see a bunch of other people and exposing themselves to a virus that they can bring back to you, well, then you may be at minimal risk, depending on your age, depending on your comorbidities. But if you are someone who goes out into the world, who meets new people, or you're around people who are meeting new people, then your risk may be higher than you realize. It's one of the things we found in hearing about these super spreader events and hearing about folks who died unexpectedly is that it's very hard to predict who gets COVID-19 and even how severe it can be, because we've heard of young people, young, otherwise healthy people ending up on ventilators, right? So it's a difficult conversation. And it is one that's all about balance, but I wouldn't, in having that conversation, I think I wouldn't discount the risk of COVID, of catching it, and of having significant symptoms.
I want to share something. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just be real quick. When
Go
Donald
ahead.
Trump had gotten COVID, what did he get to heal him so quickly? And the question is, if a person gets COVID, is the vaccine sufficient? Is it effective? Can it,
So that's a,
once they get it?
yeah. I mean, so can the vaccine protect them from
Once
having
they
symptoms?
and I really want to know, what did he take?
Yeah.
Which vaccine did he use, or combination of pharmaceuticals did he have access to?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and can lay
So,
people heal that fast from the current vaccines that are available?
He didn't have it.
Okay.
Exactly.
I don't think
He
he
never
had it.
had it. It's all
He never
fancy.
had it. Well, there's all kinds of conspiracies going out there, but I don't know.
Cares.
I'll let you answer, doctor, but I don't think he had it.
Gwynny, you do it every time. But I see a hand raised, so I'll get to this quickly. I don't have a list off the top of my head. I know he did receive, I believe he received remdesivir, which is something that we're giving to severe COVID patients in hospitals now. He received steroids, I remember hearing. And then I believe there was some other less available medication that he received. It may have been monoclonal antibodies, so antibodies from a person who is immune because they've already had COVID, or antibodies that have sort of been created in a lab to fight COVID. I
Did he
don't
get some
remember if
plasma?
that's,
Yeah, did he get some plasma or something? They were talking about a plasma treatment.
well, then you got a better memory than me. So plasma would contain those antibodies
Right.
from somebody else then. Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Miss Charlene, you have your hand raised here. What can we help you with? And I apologize, guys. This is going longer than we expected. I am happy to finish this, but I realize if you all need to get going, no hard feelings. Miss Charlene, did you raise your hand purposely? Maybe.
Oh, are you on mute, Charlene? I think she's on mute and probably doesn't know it.
Okay. Let's see. We
I'll give
can't.
her a call.
Okay. All right. So I'll keep going then.
Could I chime in with my piece real quick? I'm sorry, I didn't use the hand raise feature.
No.
I wanted to. There she is. Is she there?
I'm going to give her a call and see.
Okay.
Did you want me to go on?
Yes, please.
Okay. I just really wanted to encourage us. We talked earlier about us being women of faith, and kind of the issues that I'm grappling with. It's been very concerning for me that people are in such a frenzy to run and get the vaccine. And I granted, I know that it's important that we do it. I'm glad that people are thinking to do it, but I think that the stress and anxiety in them lining up and trying to get it and set everything up so that they can get it is almost doing more harm than good. Because it seems to have taken them to such a state of anxiety. And when they can't get it, they're so disappointed. I think they're getting depressed, and we waited all night. And it's very sad. But I think that, the faith community if there's ever going to be a time, of course, even when COVID started, this is our time. They are a captive audience. We ought to be on our A game, spreading the word of faith and spreading the word of encouragement and hope, with or without a vaccine. We have to believe that. We have to believe that with or without. If we get a vaccine, we still need God to activate that properly in our body. So I think this is a great opportunity to encourage people to trust God above all else. We, of course, not going to ignore the science, but God has to make the science work. He put that in place. And so I just kind of wanted to share that, because that's what I'm constantly thinking about, what my message needs to be as I, go to, folk whose ear I have, about the science and about faith. It has to go together for me. I think that's the message that we have to do. And that's where we're going to be in the best position then. I don't know, for whatever it's worth, that's just what I wanted to share. Amen, everybody.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? This is Charlene Jackson. Yes.
Hi.
Okay, I came a little late to the party, but I've been listening for a while, and I have a multi-sided question, and I will try my best to be brief. It is my understanding if you do take the vaccine, either of the vaccines, it does not make you immune to the virus. It simply means that if you catch the virus, that you will not be impacted greatly by it. Is that correct? That's the first part. Just want some clarity on that. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. Yes,
Okay.
that is correct.
Okay. Now, my concern with that is, will we now have a large number of people with the virus? I believe that there are many people who had the virus early on, didn't even know they had it. Now we have people who have the presumption that they are safe, that will be without mask and be heavy spreaders at that point. Because they won't be exhibiting the symptoms that will make them think that they're sick. They may assume they have a slight cold, and therefore they will be spreaders. I will tell you that I took a light pulse of the people that I'm around, and I would say about 35% of them are not going to take the vaccine. And it's because of all the historical mistrust that people of color had, and some of it is quite warranted. But it's a difficult thing to break through. They harken back to experimentation and things of that nature, and feeling devalued across the board in many ways in our society. So they almost feel as if they are the experimental portion of our society. Then we have other things that exist inside our communities. My mother has markers for Sjogren's, she has markers for sarcoid, she has all kinds of autoimmune issues. Which gives us pause, gives us a concern, makes us pause a bit. My brother has anaphylactic responses to tree nut allergies, and he was also, lisinopril actually sent him in a tizzy after taking it for 10 years. And after taking lisinopril for 10 years without an issue, one day it tipped over the edge, and he went into anaphylaxis and ended up in the hospital and had to be intubated and things of that nature. What concerned us was with further investigation of that, it was known by the medical community that this is not an uncommon thing for Black males. So my question at that point was, why was he ever given it when there were other options? So with this type of historical data that people have access to, along with every conspiracy theory in the world, it makes for a perfect storm of people who are mistrusting. And they're going to be at risk because there are going to be a large segment of the population that will be inoculated, and they will still be capable of spreading it very easily. Where do we go from here with the herd immunity that we are seeking, but still could endanger a segment of the population who is that are mistrusting and not without cause?
Yeah. I mean, that's an excellent question. And I think that's one of the reasons why Gwenny and I invited you here, was an effort to not just better understand what concerns folks have, but also to try to begin addressing them. I mean, I completely agree with you. The medical mistrust in the Black community is not unfounded. It makes a lot of sense when you've got the history that we have, and then the ongoing microaggressions, discrimination, bias that we experience in, everyday medical care. It would make a lot of sense for us not to be the first in line for a new medical therapy. I mean, it's really hard to figure out what to do with that, though, when you juxtapose it with the reality of the disparities. Like you said, the fact that we actually are more vulnerable for a number of reasons, including the fact that structural racism has made us more likely to live in neighborhoods that are food deserts, where we don't get adequate nutrition, or it's harder. We have to work harder to find fresh fruits and veggies. We're more likely to be in communities that don't have a primary care doctor or a specialist in the communities. So we're less likely to have a close relationship with a provider that we trust, as a way to confront a more global mistrust that we have with the medical system. They're just, and then you talk about racial stress, which recent studies have shown can increase risk for chronic inflammation, which can suppress the immune system and increase likelihood of developing these viruses. Like, we're super vulnerable. And no, we don't have all the information about this vaccine. And yes, we will be even more vulnerable if we disproportionately opt out. So I am encouraging family and friends to get it, primarily thinking about death from COVID-19 as sort of the worst possible outcome, and thinking about, hoping, fingers crossed, that we don't find long-term side effects to the vaccine in a year or two of follow-up trials, but considering that that may be a better outcome than, again, that worst case scenario of death from the COVID-19 virus. You make a really good point, Charlene, that the vaccine trials, both Pfizer and Moderna, only tested for symptomatic COVID. So we don't know whether it prevents asymptomatic COVID. We don't know whether folks are walking around infected and able to infect everyone else they're around. And even worse, right, without symptoms, without any clue that they might be infectious. So it is important that we tell folks as they get the vaccine, you do still need to keep wearing your mask. That's one of the ways you protect other people from you. You do still need to hand wash. The vaccine isn't carte blanche to just go back to the way we've been living, right? But once we get to that place of herd immunity, that's why there is this individual discussion to be had with oneself and one's provider and one's family, but then there is also this collective benefit to think about, because it's not until we get to that high 60s or 70% who are immune that we have enough herd immunity to go out into the world, right? When we're at 30% vaccinated, when we're at 50% vaccinated, there is still incredible risk to the people who aren't vaccinated.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So everybody has fallen in love with Dr. Fauci. And hopefully we get a chance to hear him speak on the world stage about the vaccine, about everything. My question is, as far as the pharmaceutical companies are concerned, how much are they speaking directly to you guys, the professional medical personnel? And how much are they speaking to communities directly? Because here's the thing, with COVID, usually when anything takes place in society, especially when it concerns the Black community. We have always had a history of the Black church being able to take a stand. But the unfortunate thing is that because everything is the way it is, churches cannot really just come together and stand and physically go somewhere and confront and hold different entities accountable. So the question is, the real question, how much are the pharmaceutical companies making themselves available to the community to speak directly to the community and to the public, not necessarily Dr. Fauci, but the pharmaceutical companies themselves? And is he just the only voice for the pharmaceutical companies? Because maybe I'm missing it on the news. Somebody on this chat line can let me know. But it seems like those companies are not necessarily putting their face up front.
That's a really good point.
I think that, if I could chime in, I think there's, of course, with us having the distrust of these systems, medical system, government, and all that. I think at least with many of the people that I interact with tend to be younger parents with multiple kids, so large families that are more greatly affected by the disproportionate nature of the neighborhoods they live in, crime, violence, those kinds of things. And those are the kind of people who they're not trusting anything. So they're not going to trust it even if it comes from the medical community. They're not going to trust it if it comes from the pharmaceutical companies directly, because people do understand that, of course, the pharmaceutical industry has a vested interest in just getting it out there because they make money, off that. So it really kind of, again, boils back down to those of us who are in the community and who have the closer contacts with these people to really get them to see that if we believe in it and we believe that it's not a cure all, but it's a way that we kind of just get to the next step. And if we think about it in that context of, trying to live your best life for as long as possible. And if that means, you are wearing your mask more, you're getting the vaccination so that grandma or grandpa can live longer and you can have that person as a support, that may be the way that we have to attack it. Because again, with our people, we never have the expectation that they're going to trust anyone outside of us. So we really have to kind of, I guess, band together and find our ways that, given that we cannot meet in those congregations and in those settings, that we just kind of, the main goal of Jesus, we take the message out into the world. And so in our smaller silos, in our families, just in all of the reaches that we have influence over, that we say to these people, it's about protecting us for now. We can't really worry about tomorrow because we don't know what that's going to bring. So if there is a means to help save more of us now, then we should be willing to try to do as much as possible to do that.
And if I can just piggyback on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I don't know your name. My name is Tammy, but to your point about people trusting people, when I was talking to someone not too long ago, she said to me, "You take it, I'll take it." When I showed her my appointment date to take it, she then said, "Okay, I still got to think about it." So there's some people that's just not going to trust no matter what.
Yeah. So, what is amazing about these types of conversations, and again, I thank you all for being here. I'm so thankful that Gwenny brought us together. What's amazing about this conversation is we learn new things, right? I came to this discussion thinking that I would learn how best to address the concerns of our community, right? But it turns out that maybe we who interact with our community members, we who are trusted by our community members, need sort of a two-pronged strategy to keep our communities whole. We talk to people, we educate people about the vaccine, but if they're not willing to get it, then they will need to understand that they've got to continue masking, they've got to continue social distancing. They are still at greater risk. So, I mean, all these conversations conversations are happening from a place of love, of wanting to preserve folks, of wanting them to, thrive. And I know folks who are anti-vaccine can feel a lot of shame and guilt pushed onto them. So maybe the best thing we can do is for folks who are unable to overcome that mistrust of our greater institutions and will just not get the vaccine at all. Hopefully we can impress upon them how important it is, like how much of a life-saving maneuver it is to keep taking these protective measures.
Yeah, and I think really you're right. That's it. It is the two-prong approach, because I think we all know that people thrive when they feel they have choices. And if we shame
Right.
them into believing that if you don't do this, you're bad, you're evil, you're hurting the rest of us, then that makes people even more distrustful of just what we're asking of them. So it's like you have options. The vaccine is an option and it will help in this way. And if that's something that you can't make a decision to do, there is no shame there, but you
Right.
still have to do the other thing to protect yourself and to protect the people that that you care about.
Right. In
Yeah.
a very loving, non-judgmental way.
Right. Amen to that.
Is there time for one more question?
And also,
There.
oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Dr. Arnett, I think you have done an excellent job trying to answer some of our questions. I think it is, you have done an excellent job. And then one thing that I'm finding is that it doesn't really matter whether we believe it or not. We've never been up this road before. We don't know anything about this because we've never been here before. The oldest person has never been here before. So they don't understand, the doctors don't understand, the pathologists don't understand, the people, and so everything is the continuing thing that we talk about all the time. And I was in medicine for 35 years, and it was after I got out of it, after I retired, that I realized that, oh, we're practicing medicine. So nobody has a definite answer to anything. So that's what makes us as people of faith to realize that our hope is not in the doctors or the medicine or the procedures or any of those things, but our hope and our help is in the Lord. That's who I have my hope in, and I was listening to various ones. I really appreciate the comments. I thought they were beautiful. And if we apply the real faith, the true faith, and hold on to that, and I take medication. I'm not above medication. I take it, but I pray over my medicine. So my hope is not in my medicine, but my hope is actually in prayer and in talking to God about conditions and situations. And so it's kind of interesting, for us to be on here tonight. I was throwing it back and forth because I was extremely tired. And I was going to, I'm an early bird. I go to bed early, but I get up early. So, but I'm so glad that I came on just to hear various things. One of my major questions has been from the beginning and is still, how did the whole world get COVID-19? How the whole world is affected. And so I go back and I read my word and I just say, oh, okay. The whole world. So we've got to trust God for this one. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna let that go.
Amen. Amen.
Thank
you, Dr. Sid.
Yeah. We have some strong women of faith on this line. So I'm really grateful just how the Lord laid all of you on my heart. And your opinions really, they matter. What I would like is in the chat, could everybody please type your name in the chat, in addition to, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you trust the vaccine? Of course, 0 is not at all, and 1 is absolutely. So please type in the chat that, but we're going to continue with our dialogue. I know we're going to soon wrap up time. Is that the last
Mhm.
page I will see?
This is the last page. And I think there was a question from Charlene Jackson, perhaps.
I had a question, yes.
Yes, thank you again. I would guess my roundup question would be, we're not looking at cures at this point. We're looking more so for control. And is there room for some sort of confluence where we can actually parallel those agendas, where we're not every year taking a new booster for this and a new booster for that and facing the same problems? I remember in the beginning of this, in the end of 2019, when people around me were sick and did not know. I believe it was here then because my mother was hospitalized back to back 3 times. And looking at her films, they looked like a storm had hit her lungs because I follow her on a regular basis. They looked like nothing I'd ever seen before. So here we are at a point when we're talking about a vaccine, and I will tell you what my point would be 5. I think that the vaccine is a good Band-Aid. I think it'll get us from point A to point B. And regarding to how the entire thing got over the world so rapidly, if you remember back in 2016, 2017, when they disbanded the pandemic response team, which was like an octopus that had tentacles all around the world for upticks like this to kind of get a hold on it in the initial phases. I believe that's how it grew so rapidly, along with misinformation for such a time as this, that, whether it was predicted or not, biblically or not, I believe that these things go hand in hand. So I guess I'm rounding up my question. My question is, are they going to stop looking for an all-out cure? As you said, it is a parasite. So would anti-parasitic medications be good to say, okay, let's wipe this thing out, or let's be able to take this thing for 4 or 5 days to wipe it out of our system? Things like Artemisia, you said he took from Remdesivir. I'm not sure if that has some anti-parasitic or viral components to it or not. I remember, and I'm going to piggyback one more time on the distrust. In the early 2020, doctors from the UK made a statement on the on global platform that they were rounding up their scientists and heading over to a country in Africa to start their testing. And I found it insulting. I found it hit me in my gut. It's like, okay, here we are. You're going to leave where you are, and you're going to start looking for your answers by using the large poor population in areas of Africa. And again, this just harkens to the mistrust that's there. This is going to be a problem. We're at a point where information, not just information, but misinformation, because of the availability of information through the web, is actually very informative, but it's also very damning. So I don't have any answers. I'm looking to not just the doctors, but the people standing next to me for an answer, because I don't have the words to convince the people that I know to take this vaccine. They're not, they're short of voice from the heavens. They're not going to do it.
I don't plan on trying to convince people to take the vaccine. What I plan on doing is telling them, I believe in telling them to talk to God and then be directed from there, because I feel like it's all on an individual basis. And I don't, I wouldn't want to steer anybody in the wrong direction. You know, what a vaccine might be good for one, it might not be good for the other. So I know that someone knows about the vaccine and the effect of the longer of the future, and that's God. So I only want to encourage people to tell them, you pray about that, and then you do what God has laid on your heart, because that's what I personally does about everything. And I found that He's never led me wrong. And I'm here to say to you, I have not been led to take the vaccine. Yes, I know our history of being deceived about different things, but that is not why I have not been led to do it, because I'm going to wait on God to tell me, well, yes, you can do this, or no, you don't do this, because I will protect you and take care of you. But I want to know as much, if anybody asks me questions, I want to be able to tell them what I know, what I've learned at this meeting, or what I've read about it. Tell them, well, this is what they're saying. You know, it's up to you to make the decision, okay? But right now, my question is, I see that at this time, we have an option, whether to say yes or no. Do you perceive down the road that this is going to be an absolutely requirement? You must take it, or you won't be able to do various things. Because I remember when I was a child, we had to take polio shots. You know, I remember, standing in line getting that. It was no question about it. Do you see this in the long run where we're going to be required? You can't have no decision. You must take this.
Right.
That's what I'm wondering.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think the answer is kind of yes and no as to whether COVID-19 vaccine will be required. I think there are some countries that will require COVID-19 vaccine proof before allowing you to travel into their country. I wouldn't be surprised if that's an expected travel requirement. And that's one of the things that's sort of being emphasized as we get vaccines is make sure you hang on to this vaccine card, make sure you hang on to whatever email proof is given, because it may come up later. Now, I think that as a society, we've evolved quite a bit in terms of whether we here in the US force folks to get vaccinations. And so, now there are a bunch of vaccines that kids need before they can matriculate to public school. And we may see something like that for, say, I don't know, maybe for college students on public campuses. Maybe once the vaccine is tested in children and recommended in children, maybe we'll see this on the list of required vaccines, like the polio and the measles, mumps, rubella vaccines that kids are expected to get. But even then, right, there's always the option of not sending your kids to those schools. I think there will always be a place, there will always be a choice for folks who decline the COVID-19 vaccine. Here in the US, I do think that international travel might be limited.
Interesting. Well,
yeah.
I do appreciate all of this information. I had no idea the magnitude of, the wonderful feedback that we would have gotten tonight. And one of the things that's very interesting, like I know that I'm skeptical about the vaccine myself. So I'm on the fence. I'm not advocating for it. I don't know if I'm advocating against it, but I don't want to bias what you all feel. But just to be honest, I don't have 100% trust in it. And like, Minister Bev said, to consult with God, see what the Lord says about it. Because in this day and time, is with the history of what we've experienced as Black folks, it's really difficult to make a decision on how to go. So you really have to trust God to lead you. I mean, thankfully, we have something available, but whether or not I can advocate for it, I don't know. But I know I can ask the hard questions. And I know collectively we can ask the hard questions because it's important that we do. For example, whoever thought that prisons would have become an institution that's privatized? Whereas if you have the money, you can buy a prison, and in essence, you can buy slaves. That's what it comes down to pretty much. So we are in a society society that hasn't really been kind to Black folk. And this type, thankfully we're at a point in history where we can actually talk about race openly. And people see for themselves, regardless of what race they are, that this thing with racism is very real.
Hey, I just wanted to inject, as you guys saw in the comments, I am definitely one of those people who are very hesitant about the vaccine, and I'm one. I don't take the flu vaccine. I don't do any of that. But someone said something to me, I believe it was last week. Earlier today, I had a talk about health in the Black community as a part of a Black history presentation for my church. And one of the presenters had, in my conversing with her over last week about her participation, said to me that if this was a bad thing, if this was something that they were trying to kill us off with or whatever, would they be first administering it to medical professionals, white professionals, people like that? They would not be. And I think that's the first convincing argument that I've heard concerning this vaccine, because it's like, you're right, because they're taking it first. I mean, we had someone in Philadelphia stealing them for his friends and family. So if this was something where they were trying to do us away with or take us out with, would they be the ones jumping to get it first? So it's likely that it's very safe. And that was the only thing I think that took me from a 1, absolute no, I'm not getting it, to I'm probably about a 4 or 5 now. Like, okay, it's starting to make sense. But I just wanted to put that out there in case, it helps somebody else too. I still haven't made a final decision as to yes or no, but I think that one thought has really been resonating with me, because, we see people here, they're trying to steal it. They're trying to, all kinds of stuff. They're trying to get to it. Now, some would argue that maybe, okay, there's a different one that they're sending to the Black community and they're sending to our community. But if you live anywhere in the city, you basically can go anywhere in the city to get it. So I can go to Abington or Jenkintown, or I can go to North Philly and get it. It doesn't really matter as long as you live in the city. So I think that that's something to consider. Just watching who was getting it first, who did they roll it out to? If they would have said, oh, we're going to give it to the African-American community first because they're at higher risk, and I would have been a whole lot more skeptical, like, why are we getting it first? We don't get anything first, but I think because they are rolling it out at the higher levels and with professionals and people, we need our medical professionals. So if it was bad, I don't think that they would be jumping so hard to get it. So that's just something to consider as you're making your own personal decisions.
Yeah, and then one thing is that, that's a very interesting response, definitely. But they would have had to have gotten some, give something to the medical professionals. They just can't say, okay, you're going to rely on your own antibodies to develop some type of immunity to this. So it's like, yeah, like, they may have good intentions, but still the reality is that they don't know what the long-term effects are given a year from now or 6 months from now. And, with the medical personnel, it's like they just can't send them on the front line without something. So the vaccines are something to get them through, fortunately. But, what are we going to do? But, having these dialogues are everything. And please make sure you put in the chat from a scale from 1 to 10, how you feel about the vaccine. Because I didn't know so many people were apprehensive to this level.
Yeah.
It was a small sample of the general population. So please, there's a chat below. Please enter your name, because some of your names are not showing up. So type your name first, and please type from a scale from 1 to 10. How do you feel in regards to the safety, not necessarily the effectiveness, but the safety of the vaccines that are available? That's important.
So I was going to ask you to clarify that question more. It's kind of broad, but in any case, Just to chime in on the conversation, I think the considerations, the conspiracies, the questions, they're going to be endless. They are. For every individual, they're endless. So we know when we talk about a community, when we're overlaying these decisions, unfortunately, the one thing that has to weigh in on this conversation is the urgency of what's going on now. And, the Bible talks about let every man be convinced in his own mind. And certainly I don't believe any of us are of the mindset of wanting to see anybody forced to do it. Okay. I can just, speak to it in my own personal experience. Okay. It just so happens that I am a Gulf War veteran. Okay. I am of the group that was, had a vaccine tested on us. Okay. And, years later, it did have some, adverse impact on people. So, I understand firsthand the ideal of mistrust and conspiracies and not knowing. Again, I think what we have to consider now in this time is the urgency of information being presented to the masses, to whatever extent we have access to those that we touch. And when we talk about touching our family members and them touching, it is the burden of leadership. Okay. We have a group of leaders on the line in your own individual areas. The burden of leadership says, what will I communicate to those that I can influence? And it can be heavy at times. So yes, it requires, prayer. It requires thoughtful meditation and all the things, that we do when we try to present information to people. But the urgency of now, the urgency of time, that we will not just diminish as a community is burdensome on me when I think about what can I say? Will what I say to someone make the difference of them saying no or yes? And we can't answer all those questions. So we really have to rely on God. I just want us to be encouraged, and know above all that love covers a multitude of sin. When we do what we do in love, I just believe God will respond. And we don't have to know all of the answers. We're not supposed to know them. But again, as we rely on God for direction, for peace, for influence, all those things, we have to know that it's going to turn out right. Relying on him. I don't have the answers, but I'm grateful for having been a part of this. I've learned so much and heard so much from all of you. And God be with us.
I agree.
These are praying times.
I don't think that we tell people to do or not to do. I think we point them to the education and let them make the decision for themselves. In doing therapy and counseling people, should I leave him? Should I do this? I can't tell you that, because you stay and you get beat up and you get killed. You leave and then you regret it and you look at me and you're mad at me. I don't tell people one way or the other. It's here's the education, here's the information. You make the decision for yourself. So I think as community leaders and people who may have influence in our communities, it's not our responsibility really to say do it or not to do it. I think it's our responsibility to do what Gwen did and get the information and the education in front of people and let them make their own decisions.
I love that. And to your point, I put something in the chat here. If you send people to this link to www.bytewellness.com/vaccines, that's Byte Wellness with a Y, they can sign up to get on a webinar like this one. And so they can get information directly. We can talk things through. There's also on that same page the sign up for the course I mentioned, the 14-day text message course, free lessons on how to support your immune system by eating nutritious foods, regular exercise, and then getting adequate rest. So all information that's important, whether you get the vaccine or not, right? We talked about how we have this choice. I have been advocating that friends and family get the vaccine. And, you know, Tammy Pullins mentioned something in the chat which resonates with me, which is, you know, I think of the role that God plays as a little bit like a watchmaker. And so I think that, you know, the science, the fact that this science has been developed is almost miraculous. The fact that we were able to get the vaccine in time, it's almost miraculous. And so the way that I look at it, the way that my faith operates is, look, we seem to have a solution, and I'm going to have faith that this is in our benefit. I don't really see, we all operate differently, right? But I don't see these scientific developments as necessarily at odds with my faith. So that's another perspective to present to folks as you're having that conversation. But regardless, right, especially if you're not getting the vaccine, we're going to need to keep masking, social distancing, hand washing, and then doing all these other things to keep your immune system healthy so that you can either prevent infection or at least confront the infection in a productive way without that inflammatory portion of your immune system taking over and leading to severe COVID symptoms.
Can I ask a quick question, totally off the realm a little bit, because you said anti-inflammatory, one time too many for me. So I was
right. We didn't address that.
I am a COVID survivor, and since then, body has just really not been the same. It's been all whacked out. But one of the primary things is that I have a lot of inflammation. And, you know, I started just personally reading up on, you know, so my doctor did a whole thing of blood tests, and then I started reading up on what I can do to get rid of inflammation. And so now I started changing my diet and eating differently. But have you heard that with any of the patients that you've come across?
Yeah, so COVID is very pro-inflammatory. Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why it's such a nasty disease, is it really revs up the immune system to respond to it in this very specific way that creates the sort of inflammatory pus we were talking about. That's why it creates trouble breathing. We thought about COVID as infecting the lungs, but what we learned on the provider side as we continued through the pandemic is that it's really just an inflammatory surge throughout the entire body. People are getting strokes, they're developing blood clots in their brain, they're developing blood clots in their lungs, in the vessels that lead to their kidneys, they're going into kidney failure, and it's because of this inflammatory surge. So that's why people who have a compromised immune system do worse with COVID. Not because COVID is so much stronger in their bodies, but because their immune system revs up very slowly. It doesn't react well enough because it's not that healthy. And when it finally does react, it does so with this explosion of inflammation and isn't balanced enough to cut off that inflammation the way that it should. People who are completely healthy otherwise, and we have no reason to believe that they have a compromised immune system, some of those folks complain about prolonged inflammation after COVID as well. So yeah, this is, unfortunately, I'm sorry you're going through this, but this is not uncommon. You know, I would, again, I recommend, it's completely free. Take advantage of these resources, please. If you go to that website and you just sign up, your cell provider is going to charge you for a daily text message, but that's it. Think about what foods you can eat, what anti-inflammatory foods you can eat. We talk about these things in the course. Make sure that you're getting enough rest.
So I've been working on doing that. I bought an anti-inflammatory cookbook, and I've been trying out these recipes.
And make sure okay. Provider too.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys, we've gotten through a lot. You know, one more thing to say is just the last thing we didn't address is that question of whether people with autoimmune diseases can get the vaccine. And again, they're on that list that the World Health Organization and the CDC say, hey, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to get it. But if you don't feel comfortable, definitely talk with your provider about the risks and benefits. People with autoimmune conditions are considered immunosuppressed. And that means that their immune systems are not optimally healthy. So they are actually the exact people who should be getting the vaccine to make sure that they don't develop COVID-19. Again, Byte Wellness with a y.com/vaccine to get more information or point people in that direction to get more information. And I'm so thankful that you all came out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
guys so
you.
much.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna
Very,
follow
very
up.
much.
If
God
you guys
bless.
haven't
Dr. Good seeing you again.
If you
You
guys
too,
haven't
Tammy. I didn't realize that was you.
How are you? I'm still using
Such
the
a
recipes that you gave me 5 years ago.
what? Oh, that's so good to hear. Oh my God. Ah,
Good to see you. Thank you, Gwen.
Yeah, you're
have a good
welcome.
night, guys.
Thank you guys. One quick thing, you guys are going to follow up with the newsletter. And the way we're going to use this newsletter is that if you guys have information that is very impactful for the community, this is going to be a resource available for you to get that information out. One of the things also is that I would like for you guys to be able to connect with each other, because everybody is doing something so powerful that this will serve as a network, so that if you're doing something in your community or your church or whatever you're doing, we can really be impactful to reach out and to help you with whatever you're doing. That's one of the main reasons why I established this journal, and it's called Love Light Journal. And I wanted to keep it light, and I wanted to focus on women who are, you know, women who are not just using the word of God as a crutch, but using it to help shape the lifestyle that they already have as spiritual women, as obedient women. That's my dog. So I'm going to get a copy of the newsletter to you. Please read it through and through. Because one more thing too, the College of Physicians of Philadelphia, they're on the front page of the newsletter. They're doing something also in regards to all of this racism and its impact on us. So, I'm going to follow up with that information. I want to connect with you guys to find out what you guys are already doing. Because I know Cynthia is doing a ministry. She and her colleague, Minister Angela, they're doing a ministry all the way in South America. Okay. And then I know Minister Bev, she's doing stuff all the time. Sister Carlotta, she's doing something in regards to, like, for what I understand, she was doing a lot about trauma, how trauma affects not only kids, she's also into the social work arena. And then we have Sister Charlene Jackson. She does a lot with just everything. She's on the front line, making sure she keeps her family healthy. And then, of course, we have Pam Evans, who is always like everywhere. Like, she is the Michelle Obama in a lot of her circles. Of course, we have Tammy. She's the Michelle Obama at her church. And then, like, I don't see everybody's names because I have registered you guys to relieve you of the burden of having to register. But unfortunately, my name is showing up instead of your name. So that's why I was like, write in the chat so I can know who you are. And then this minister is Dr. Sydney. Like, she's doing like these amazing ministries like all over the place. So you women are like really powerful. I'm looking at who I can see. Hope I'm not leaving the names out. There's also Saranda. She's like a really like someone who's like stays in the background, but she's like she's a speech therapist. She's been working with children for like 20 something years. When my nephew and my sister was worried that my nephew wasn't speaking soon enough, Saranda came in, did a full professional assessment. And now my nephew Gabe is like, my sister can't stop him from talking. That's all he does now. He's like about 10. So, but anyway, the bottom line is that I want to keep you guys abreast of what's going on. We're supporting Dr. Mawusi as she goes forth, healing people, educating people. It's like she has a business. She also works at the hospital. She does ministry in her church. She's always giving back to the community. And, she's making stuff available to us for free. So, the idea is to take advantage of that. Look at her website, see how what she's offering can benefit you, and how what you may be able to find on her website, how it might be able to benefit your family and friends. The idea is this conglomerate of women, the idea is to spread the word, and then to also for you to not have to work in a bubble. Like, understand, like today, you have a support network of women behind you. I want to make that perfectly clear. You tell me something you're doing, I'm going to put the word out. I'm going to put the word out. Here with this whole Corona thing, everybody's like working in these little quiet little bubbles, all this stress. You tell me something, I'm putting the word out. If you have something that you need to reach the community and you need women behind you, I got you. As a matter of fact, on May 6th, I already put the information out. That's on a Thursday. It's the National Day of Prayer. And I'm telling you, I'm going in hard. I'm reaching out to the sisters. We've already got a contact in Colorado, of course, Chicago. And Mawisa, I'm going to introduce you to a very seasoned lady in Chicago. She's a powerhouse. She just told me 3 weeks ago, she's thinking about running for office. She's amazing. Okay. She's in Chicago.
All right. I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Please.
We've got
All
folks
right.
in Texas. We've got folks, of course, in New York, Maryland, DC, of course, Delaware. So we're going to reach out. And if you're doing some type of ministry where you need to have women behind you, like, for example, Transfiguration, when you guys start to meet in person and when you have the annual anniversary, we got you. Sister Bev, Minister Bev, Pam, Carlotta, you guys, just I got you. So anyway, I'm going
to have an event around domestic violence, which has tripled over the whole COVID year that we've had. So I will get that information to you.
Okay, we're going to talk about that. Definitely. I got you. Definitely. Ladies, Dr. Mawusi, thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for being here.
Love you, Doc. Good to see you again.
Oh, you too. You too.
Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you.
Take care,
God
guys.
bless.
Good night. Bless you.